Hey everybody, this is Nick on Control Nick, and today I'm going to teach you something a little bit different than normal. This isn't about functions or how to do any special features in Excel. Today is about how you make your Excel workbooks look a little bit nicer and cleaner so that you hand over more quality work to your colleagues. Now, I would advise doing this for all the workbooks that you work within. I do this on a daily basis, and I actually want to just show you today the tips and tricks that I do every time I work within Excel. So let's head on over to a workbook and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so we're officially in a blank workbook. So I've just opened up a random one and there's no pre-formatting. This is just the default settings that we have in Excel. What I like to do is click with my cursor up in the top left corner where you have that bottom right arrow. You click there and that actually highlights all the cells in your workbook because I want to format the same cells the same way. Once we have everything selected, firstly, always consider a font style that you want to use. So for myself, I like to use Arial font. So that's what I'm going to select in under Home and where it shows Aptos Narrow being the default. I'm going to click in there once and then just type in Arial, enter. Now, all cells that you have highlighted here are Arial font. Next thing I like to do is default the size of the text. So I like to use default 10. You can keep it at 11. You can increase it or decrease it more. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to use 10. That's just my go-to. I typed in 10 and enter. Now, I like to make sure I don't work with grid lines. I don't like how grid lines actually look. I find it a little bit chaotic looking, and I like that clean view that Excel offers without grid lines. So in order to remove the grid lines, getting rid of those means going to the View tab in Excel, and then just below to the right, you have this pre-checked box called grid lines. You just uncheck that, and you can see below that actually now all of your cells no longer have grid lines associated with them. Next, what I then like to do is, besides using the plain white background that we always see when we open Excel, I like to work with a more dark style for the background color so that when I create tables, they pop a little bit more. So what I want to do is go back to where we have the Home tab, and then where you have the pre-filled color coding, I'm just going to drop down this menu using the drop down arrow. And then for the sake of this video, I'm actually going to use this light gray default color. There you can actually see, I'm going to click away from the highlighting and you can see that everything is now lighter gray. And actually, if I select just these cells randomly here, go to the drop down and do no fill, you'll see that the cells are already starting to pop if you wanted to make a specific table within that section. But let's undo that because there's a couple more things that we actually want to do. I'm going to select all the cells once again, and then we're going to actually set the color tone for your font. So whenever you type in absolutely anything actually into any of these cells in this workbook, it's always going to use the exact same color. So the default is the black color that you have here. So when I click on the drop down and look under theme colors, you can see black is already pre-selected. I personally use a very specific RGB code. And if you have a business or you work within a company, I would advise using the dominant color that's associated with either your business or your company. The one that I use is down here. It's this darkish blue tone that's already been defaulted for me. But you can also go into more colors, and once you pop that up, you can choose a different standards within here. Or if you select custom, you can type in a specific RGB code, your specific HSL code, or a specific hex number. It fully depends on what you want to use, but the whole idea here is just always make sure that whatever you're submitting is consistent across the board. I'll close out of this, and I'm actually going to select my darkest blue color here. Now, those are actually some of the most important tools that I do every single time that I open Excel is I just adjust this every time. As you get used to it, it takes no more than 20 seconds and it adds that extra flair of professionalism to your workbook. And you can see if you're typing in, it all sticks with, if I highlight these cells, it sticks with Arial, it sticks with 10. We have the default coloring background as that light gray, and it's using that darkish blue. Now, I'm going to teach you a couple extra tricks that I like to do as well to really just hone in on a specific area of the workbook. So I'm going to delete this here. And let's say you just want to work on a table. The data could be sitting somewhere else. It could be sitting in another tab, for example. I just open up a random tab, but you want this first tab here to be your main source. So let's just go through an example table that we create. So for example, let's use B3 as the starting point. And I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit so it's easier to see. And let's say hypothetically, we had a bunch of months and a couple of sales reps, and we just want to see the amount of money that they've made for each of the months for each of those sales reps. So we're going to go through some very random data. I don't have a preset data here, but it's just to show you how you can kind of format your tables to make them look a little cleaner before you send them over to people. So first thing I'm going to do is type in, let's say, some headers. So we don't need to do all 12 months. I think that's a little overkill for this exercise, but let's just start with Jan. I like to do just the first 3 letters of the month, so we don't need to overwrite anything. Jan, Feb, March, and then Q1. So the sum of these 3 will be what we have in column F as Q1. Then in the rows, let's say we had sales rep 1, and then sales rep 2 being the next one, and then it can go down a little bit. Let's say there's 5 sales reps, and then you have at the very bottom a grand total. Again, we're just creating a sample table that maybe you want to use as a formatting style for the future. What I can do is you can see that there's some overlap because of the text between columns B and column C. So sales rep 1 through 5, it's a little bit long, and I actually don't want to do that. I actually want to give some cushion space to make it look a little cleaner. So I'm actually going to select the full column of column B, and then under the Home tab, all the way to almost to the right, you have the option called Format, and in there you can actually format the columns and rows to a specific size that you're interested in. So in here, when I select column width, you'll notice that the default is 8.09. That's always the default for Excel, but I actually want to extend that column width a little bit more, again, to give that extra cushion. So let's use 14 as the column width. So I just typed in 14, clicked OK, and you can see that specific column that we highlighted has extended to 14 wide. Now that we have that and we're happy with that extra space in column B, I'm just going to type in some random numbers here. Actually, let's just use 120 across the board. With this random data, I also want to make sure that everything looks a little cleaner, a little more aligned. So what I'm going to do is for all of these cells here where we have data, I want them to be centered with each other as well. So again, under the Home tab, you can also adjust the cells using these different index functions you have over to the right of the font color. As you can see, I can do left indent. It'll indent everything to the left that you have selected. You can do to the right, but for the sake of this video, I want to show it to the center. And then I also want the cells to always be in the middle. You'll notice it didn't actually move any of these cells when I selected middle because they're small enough where there's nothing to move within. But if you create more space in the rows, then that would actually show a difference. So we have all this random information here with these sales reps, these individual months, and then what I'm going to do is a simple function of sum to sum together each of the rows here. Let's bring it all the way down, and then I want a grand total showing as well. So we're going to do sum of each of the different rows we have in across the board. And then in column B3, I like to also give the table a header. So let's just give a general header. Let's call that sum of Q1 sales. And you can see actually because we extended the column width enough, it also fits that header a bit more. But to be honest, because I'm a little bit picky, I actually want to highlight column B again. I'm going to go back to Home, Format, Column Width, and change the width to 16, again, just to make it a little bit more spacious. What you could also do is hover your mouse in between B and C, and you can see it pops up this adjuster here. And if you hold down the mouse click, you can actually adjust that manually as you'd like. But if you need to be specific, you just go to Format and format the column to how you'd like. That's typically how I do it. So Now that we have that, let's add some bold. So what I've done here is I've just highlighted the cells of B2 through BF, and I've done Control and B. That is the shortcut to bold the text that you're looking at. You can also go to Home and then select the B here. Typically, all the formatting tricks go under the Home tab, but you can also start to learn those quick shortcuts as well. I'm also going to bold grand total and all of the different values that we have in there. And then we just want to add a little more flair to this table because in this example, technically you have all the information you need, but it's not that professional flair that you really want to give it just yet. So firstly, let's actually change the header view. So I'm actually going to select all of the different cells for the header, and we want to add extra color to it to make it pop a little bit more. So for here, I actually like to go with the rule of thumb that for whatever the font color is, that's going to be the fill color for your header. And then the font color will just be the white, or it'll just be an offset color to make it pop within the text. But for this sake, I'm actually going to go to the drop-down fill and then select that same fill color as the font. And you'll notice it makes the font disappear because it's the exact same color. But that means now I can just go under the font coloring and then change the text color so that it's now white. You can see that pops a little bit more. Then what I want to do is for all of the data here, I actually want to highlight it all and change that light gray to a white. Again, that's just going to make it pop a little bit more in the workbook. And then I also want to highlight the grand total, and I'm going to make that a little bit of a darker color so that also pops a bit more when we're looking at it. So let's actually use, for this example, we're going to use this lightish gray as well. That's giving it a little more flair, but now you can actually see that it blends a bit into the background. So instead of having it blend in, we can add some borders. So if I hover over all of the cells that we're using for this table, again, under the Home tab, if you select this drop-down arrow next to the underline function, so you have that here, you have the different borders. I'm going to use probably a thick outside border for this one. And you can see, again, it's just adding that extra layer to professionalizing the table that you have in. The very last bit that I would say that I would like to use for this is just to show that this Q1 is actually a sum. All of these different cells that are not the grand total that are not bold yet, I'm actually going to bold those. So again, going under Home, you can select B. That's going to make that text bold. And to give it a final touch, I'm going to go to the fill color, and then I'm going to add an extra fill color here to show that everything in Q1 is a sum. And the more you add consistency to your tables and how you actually showcase the work within these workbooks, the easier it's going to be for either your business or for your colleagues to understand exactly what they're looking at. Now, last bit, and this is just some extra, maybe some could consider unnecessary level of information here, but I'm going to go for it anyway, is what I like to do is also make everything look a little more even with the columns and the rows in this dead space. So firstly, for column A, I like to make that a certain width, so it always looks aligned. So I'm going to go back to Home, Format, Column Width, and I'm actually going to make that column width as a 2. So that looks pretty similar actually to if you look at the row height versus the column width now. And what I also want to do is make sure that there's always one space of column and row in between the tables. So I'm going to delete this first row that we have here. So I selected row 1. I can right click on it now, and then I'm going to click delete. And that's just going to bring the table up one. Next, I'm also going to look at column G, and I'm also going to make that a little less wide. So I'm going to Home, Format, Column Width. I'm changing that to 2 as well. Same thing as column A, and OK. And you'll notice that that makes it the same width as column A, both between A and G. And you also have row 9 and row 1 being similar to the column widths. So it's all fitting within this perfect rectangle. The very last bit that I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of any unnecessary rows or columns in this workbook. So the first thing I want to do is next to column G, where we've already formatted, I'm going to select column H. Then on your keyboard, a nice little trick, what you can do is if you hold down Control and Shift at the same time, and while holding down those keys, I'm going to select the right arrow on my keyboard. When I do that, it brings highlighting to all of the columns to the far rightmost side of an Excel workbook. Now that I have everything highlighted, I actually want to hide those columns because we're not using them. It's unnecessary extra visual, and I only want the user of this workbook to only look at that table. So I'm going to right click on any of these highlighted columns, and then there's an option called Hide. When I select hide, it's going to bring you back to the table side, and you'll notice it only shows A through G now. We've hidden all of those extra columns. I'm going to do the exact same thing for the rows, except this time when I select row 10 and hold down Control and Shift on the keyboard, I don't do the right arrow, I do the down arrow. So I do down arrow, and then I'm going to go over and then right click, and then I'm going to actually hide these as well. And you'll notice that now everything's hidden for the columns and the rows, and the only thing that's visible is that specific table that's being worked on. And if you've looked at other videos of mine, you'll notice this is always how I'm working. This is always how I have things set up. And I think it's important to consider always use a maximum of 3 or 4 colors because it just gives you consistency and it doesn't overrun or cause too much complication in what you're actually looking at when you're creating these visuals. That was actually it for today's video. I know it was pretty dense and there's a lot of different things going on at once, but I promise is the more you get used to this, the more easy it's going to be for you to set this up quickly. Please pause the video, keep trying and keep trying to follow along. I don't have a link for you to follow the workbook because I think you should just start from scratch and give it a go. If you found it interesting, I really do hope you like and subscribe, and feel free to look at other content that I've created. I think all of it plays together, and I hope it helps you in some way or the other. Thank you so much and have a great day.